Um, if people are hearing, those of you who are listening to the podcast are hearing from me maybe a little bit too much, but we'll leave that part aside for the moment. Um, Here we are again. Uh, it's really hard to fully um, capture feelings these days. It really is. Um, there is, this greater and greater level of frustration and feeling that we don't know what's to come. Um, there is, of course, I've written about it in the last week, um, the sense that, what I had been written a long time ago about President Trump and his policies, that they are coming to fruition for better or for worse. The decision on the Houthis to leave us out of any deal or not worry about us in the deal um, is more than a little bit problematic, to say the least. During the whole Biden administration, it may not have been as effective in bombing as during the Trump administration, but the Biden administration was bombing the Houthis on and off for the last year and a half. Uh, it was, the first day or two. Well, maybe they're really not going to fire on us. Maybe there's a secret deal. Maybe um, maybe it was all, Trump playing four-dimensional chess, as some people seem to think he plays. But the reality was, we found out Friday afternoon for sure when the air raid sirens went off, and there we go again, another Houthi missile. Uh, there are less missiles in the last few days. I think a result of the ongoing American campaign destroyed a lot of their missiles and also created effectively a blockade of um, of Yemen from Iran. That blockade is probably no longer. We cannot impose a blockade on Yemen. It's too far away. We can't impose an air blockade. We can't impose a maritime blockade. Possibly we have a submarine down there. We have the ability but we don't have the Americans' ability. We don't have anything close to the Americans' ability. And so I would suspect in the next couple of weeks they'll get additional arms from Iran, especially if there's a deal made by the Trump administration with Iran relating to the nuclear program. But regardless of that, my guess is they're going to get additional missiles from the Iranians, and then it'll just be more often they'll fire their missiles. Um, so far, there are still, out of the 100 airlines that were flying to Israel before the war, there are still 25 flying. In other words, this last round did not cut off all of the airlines as some of the previous ones did. All the American airlines stopped, of course, Delta and United. American Airlines hadn't even come back yet. Um, and the major European airlines all stopped flying. Major ones, being the Lufthansa Group and the Italian airline and the Spanish airline. Lufthansa Group includes KLM, British Air, Scandinavian Airlines, and the low-cost airlines, Wizz and Ryanair, which carry a tremendous number of flights. The airlines that are still flying are some of the Eastern European airlines. Um, they're still flying, and of course, um, the Emirates Air in Dubai, the Air Dubai, they're still flying. They flew all the way through the war. I think they stopped one day in the middle of the Iranian attack. It was the only time they didn't fly. But everybody else has stopped flying. I guess they're not worried about the value of their planes because they can afford to replace them and the crews will fly in any case. And of course, there's El Al and Israel and Arkia, and this airline that's half Israeli owned, Bluebirds, which is a Greek registered in Greece. But as long as the European authorities don't officially declare that European airlines can't fly to Israel, they'll keep on flying. Like I said, they're at least 50% owned by Israelis, if not more, with a lot of Israeli crews. Um, and thankfully we have El Al. For all the moaning about El Al, El Al has been the bridge that's kept us connected to the world. I personally am happy they made a lot of money in the last year. They managed to retire their debt completely, and they have on order the largest airline purchase in their history, which will be a couple of years um, until they get delivered. But they have a modern fleet, a new fleet, relatively speaking. So that's all good. Prices are higher than they could be if there was more competition. And of course, the problem always is they put a cap on how high the prices can go because the computer systems automatically, as seats become more and more scarce, prices go up, and those whole load factor issues. And that's part of the reason why prices have been so high is if you're trying to get a ticket when there aren't any tickets, it's harder and harder to get a ticket. But like I said, at least we have El Al to provide us with an air bridge. Now, of course, the reason the Houthis are firing on us, at least their stated reason, and we have to accept it's their stated the reason is the fact, because during the ceasefire they were not firing on us. They only started firing when we decided to go back to war. And we forget, it's easy to forget, but the fact is we decided to go back to war and ignore the agreement. And when I hear these terms, Hamas refuses to be flexible. Listen, I'm not a lover of Hamas, and I wish we had some laser method of destroying every Hamas member. But leaving that part aside, if I was Hamas, I wouldn't agree to an interim agreement. I said all along, I want to give back all the hostages. I want end of the war. That's what they wanted from day one. And that's the only way we're going to get back all the hostages. Now, all of the stories, I hear this argument being made, they'll never give back all the hostages, so we can't agree to that. But if they don't give back all the hostages, then we don't have to end the war. We can keep on, even on the face of it. If they don't give them all back, then we keep on fighting. I don't understand this logic. If you're afraid they won't give them all back, well, call them on it. Call them. If they don't give back the last 5, then you go back in and you keep on fighting. But in the meantime, you get them all back, and maybe they'll give back all of them. That's what they said. They said they're willing to give them all back in return for the end of the war. I haven't understand I mean, I know what the logic. Logic is not logic. It's not military logic. It's all the fact that Smotrich and Ben Gvir and a few of the others believe we have to make use of this opportunity to destroy Hamas. We have to keep on fighting and fighting and fighting. What are a few lives in terms of the fighting? And they are disconnected from the reality of Israel in their own sense. They were religious zealots who are not connected to the reality of the economy of Israel, even though Smotrich is supposedly the finance minister, but he spends most of his time worrying about putting up more settlements in the West Bank, Yehuda v'Shomron. That's their dream, to keep on fighting and to eventually possibly resettle Gaza. There are people who've been dreaming about it since the pullout from Gush Katif. And they don't care what the world thinks. They don't care that there are, fewer and fewer air flights to Israel, that businessmen can't come. That tourism, other than Jews who are coming to show their solidarity, or or other people who are coming to show their solidarity, or people who have, family connections or coming to a wedding or bar mitzvah or whatever it might be, tourism is close to zero and has been since the beginning of the war. But they don't make their money on tourism. Most of the people who live in Hebron, where Smotrich lives, and in the settlement that, excuse me, not Smotrich, Ben Gvir lives in Hebron. Smotrich lives in a different settlement on the West Bank. Most of the people, they work for the government as teachers and other jobs. They're not part of the real economy. And that's another part of the problem. They're disconnected. But Netanyahu needs them for his coalition. And so he follows what they want. Now, he may even believe it. I don't know. The problem is the minute the war ends, 2 things happen. Number one, he won't be able to claim total victory, something he's been talking about for the last year and a half. A year ago, he said we were a few, I don't know the exact translation in English, but a small slice away from total victory. And of course, it's been a year. And total victory is you can't define, it's very hard to define what is total victory. People have this idea of total victory being Japan and Germany in 1945. Well, that was total victory. But in both cases, the governments surrendered, and a separate government was established instead. Um, there's no question, if anyone remembers some of my writings before our our ground assault in Gaza. Before we started that assault, I wrote, there is no point in having a ground assault unless you have a plan for the day after. Military force is only good at changing the political reality, and that political reality um, is needs to be replaced with another plan. And here we are, a year and 7 months, 8 months almost into this war, and we have no plan the day after, so to speak. There is no plan for the day after. And there can't be victory without a plan for the day after. There can't be anything without the plan for the day after. And so we're stuck. There's this plan to go back and heavy fighting once again. After Trump leaves the Middle East, they'll begin heavy fighting once again in Gaza, because that will quote unquote release the hostages. And no one believes that, except the people talking about it. No one believes that more heavy fighting is going to get Hamas to give up the hostages. Didn't work previously. It's not going to work now. Only a deal will do that. And unfortunately, Hamas wants to remain in power. I mean, that's what they want. Can we find something else? Well, we could have. We could have gotten some of the Arab Sunni states to get involved, to partially take over Gaza. There were lots of possibilities. And yet, because we can't say the word Palestinian state, mind you, I'm not in favor of a Palestinian state anytime soon, but because we can't talk about the eventuality of a Palestinian state, none of them will go along. They need the camouflage, the cover, so to speak, of some sort of future Palestinian state. This government can't say those words. And so if this government can't say those words, we can't do anything together with anybody. Look, Trump had a plan, which was the Biden plan too, mind you. Don't think that, Trump is not bringing anything new. But the plan was to make a deal with Saudi Arabia. They would include giving them advanced arms, allowing the Saudis to have some version of nuclear power. Some version is very questionable and a big problem, but we'll leave that aside. But in return for normalization with Israel, diplomatic relations with Israel, opening up more of the Muslim world for Israel, talking about using Saudi Arabia, a railroad across Saudi Arabia, going to Israel, to the Mediterranean, all sorts of different crazy possibilities. But that was dependent on not fighting in Gaza anymore. After all, that's why Hamas started the war, was to undermine that possibility. And B, talking about some future plan so the Palestinians have some sort of roadmap that they could follow towards a statehood. There have been lots of roadmaps, mind you. You go back, even post Barak's failure in Camp David in 2000, there was a roadmap that Ariel Sharon agreed with President Bush. It was a roadmap towards a Palestinian state. Of course, the Palestinians blew it because Hamas continued terror attacks, and neither Arafat nor Abbas, who came in instead, more or less at that point, could fight Hamas, or wanted to fight Hamas, or wanted to change the situation. So we've had roadmaps, but those roadmaps allowed us to at least talk about making progress in other ways. And right now, there is no roadmap, there is no plan, and no one's willing to make any deals with us going forward. So overall, it is extremely, extremely, extremely frustrating. There's no other way to say it. There's no other way to go we go every Saturday night to the Hostage Square. I walk through it every morning and know there's absolutely nothing we can do. It's up to this government that does not want to do anything. It would be happy to get 10 hostages free. That's willing to do. We get 10 free, a couple of weeks of ceasefire, that's worth it. But to end the war means taking on the political the political costs within the internal coalition, that's not likely to happen. And it hasn't happened. And until Netanyahu thinks he can win an election and call new elections, which isn't happening right now because every one of his polls shows him not in office if there's a new election. Now, two other things worth talking about, or three. First of all, a little more on Trump's trip, which takes place. I think he's leaving on Monday night to Saudi Arabia, and he's going to Qatar. I think one of the UAE also. There's a lot of fear in this country, a lot of rumors, a lot of talk about what he's going to give, what he's going to agree to. There's talk about him meeting with Abbas and the Syrian leader as well, together in Saudi Arabia. There is a lot of talk of him agreeing to the nuclear program without without the need to them to recognize Israel. Even without the nuclear program, he's going to agree to billions and billions of dollars of high-tech weaponry to be given to Saudi Arabia. We have an agreement that Israel always maintains a technological edge over anybody. I doubt he's going to pay much attention to that. I mean, I go back to the 1980s, I think it was 1980s, when Reagan wanted to sell AWACS to the Saudis, and the AIPAC fought him. And of course, AIPAC lost, because when the president of the United States wants to do something, especially a popular president, you're not going to be able to stop him. So we won't be able to stop the sale of the advanced weapons to Saudi Arabia. And that's even assuming they don't go ahead with some sort of nuclear program. So it's not good. Let's put it that way. It's not good. It's our own fault, but it's not good. And then there's, of course, the Iranian situation. It's very hard to figure out where the exact line is of the Trump administration relating to Iran. On one hand, they say tremendous progress is being made and the negotiations are going forward and everything else. And then Witkoff makes a statement over the weekend saying that under no circumstances will they be allowed to enrich. But another statement is made by J.D. Vance 2 days before that, or a day before that, that there's no problem if they have a civilian nuclear program. So the American messaging is confused the same way the American government is confused. And as a result, it's not clear where the American position really is, and what the Iranians are going to have to agree to or not agree to. I think one of the other things we need to be concerned about is, as it's become clearer that Trump really, really, really doesn't want to use military force. The Iranians understand that as well. And so the ability to get a good deal with them goes down the less they're worried about American using military force in the end. So that's concerning, to say the least. And we'll have to see in the days coming up. First of all, they had a 3-hour meeting today. Reports are that there was a quote-unquote good meeting. We'll have to see what that means. The Iranians are afraid it's all a camouflage and America's secretly planning an attack on them. Maybe. I don't think so, but maybe. So we'll have to see. The reports right now, which I heard those about a week ago, and now it's made it big all over the United States and Israel, is the fact that the Qataris are planning to give a 747 8 series to Trump as a present. The Boeing has been building 2 new Air Force Ones, or 3, I think, 747-8s now since the first Trump administration. Now, why they can't build these is a whole question, but supposedly the communications and everything involved is so intricate that it's going to take another 6 years to build these. I mean, it's an absurd amount of time, and it says something of the state of the American aerospace industry, but we'll put that part aside. There's this little thing called the emolument clause of the U.S. Constitution. Presidents are not supposed to receive gifts. And no one seems to care in Washington because no one's going to prosecute. But the level of corruption that's going on at the moment is something that it's beyond the founding fathers turning in their graves. It's beyond absurd, and no one cares at all. It's the strangest thing. The idea that they're going to give a present of a $400 million plane. I mean, really? But so many different areas. Well, the Qataris have been really big at giving presents. Let's put it that way. And the Trump sons have been in Qatar this last week negotiating the deal for building Trump, Qatar or whatever it's going to be called, and a Trump golf course there and everything else. So that seems to be the main issue. We can't offer as much. There's this half-built building, and well, it's now being finished, but there's a building not too far from me that was started being built, I don't know, 6 years ago, went up a little bit and stopped, went up a little bit and stopped. Supposedly at some point during this whole thing, during the initial period, it was going to be Trump Tel Aviv, but that never happened. So not sure what the story is with that and with those plans, but that's, a problematic state of where we are relating to that. A little domestic politics. The situation with the ultra-Orthodox draft is getting more and more serious. There is going to be no agreement. It's quite clear at this point there will not be a draft bill that's acceptable to the ultra-Orthodox. For the moment, they are continuing to vote or not vote with the coalition at initial votes in the Knesset, which means no new laws can be brought up and the coalition can pass it. Stuff is already in the hopper and has passed the first reading. They're still supporting the government, but anything new, they're not supporting the government, which is a good thing. It's a bunch of crazy laws that they wanted to present are not making it through. The question is, at what stage will the rabbis decide to do something that's semi-irrational? In other words, they have no better government. If there's new elections, the odds are very high they will find themselves in the opposition. But on the other hand, some of the rabbis are finding it harder and harder to support a government which basically, if not arrests, but is stopping the yeshiva bachas from leaving the country and doing other things and not allowing them to get out of the draft, legally. Let's put it that way. All of them are now draft dodgers at this point, and they all are theoretically subject to arrest. How that will work forward? At some point, the rabbis will say enough. And even though there's not an alternative government, we can't remain as part of this government any longer. And I suspect we'll see something at some point. When, I do not know. But it will happen at some point because this is a situation that can't be solved, basically. Not as long as we need soldiers. An interesting statistic that I was going to write about tonight, but I'll say it here now. It's the manpower division of the IDF made it not announced, but released the figure that 20% of the combat soldiers in Gaza are women at this point. Think about that. It wasn't very long ago we didn't have women's combat soldiers at all. Right now, 20% of the combat soldiers are now women. There may be secondary lines, but inside Gaza, 20% are women. So I guess that's progress in a way. I mean, depending on how you look upon that as being progress or not progress. So here we are. New heavy fighting hasn't yet begun. And theoretically, we're waiting for Trump to complete his visit that he's going to only start on, I guess, tomorrow night, or I guess he's leaving tomorrow night. Many things up in the air. A lot of people are putting hopes on the fact that he forces the Israeli government to agree to the ceasefire and end the war. Reports today from NBC or ABC, I forget which one of them, was that Trump was basically angry at Bibi over over both his pushing in terms of Iran, but also for going back to fighting. He said it's a waste of time. Don't always agree with President Trump, but I agree with him in this case. It's a waste of time, and worse than a waste of time. It's tragic. And of course, the thing we don't talk about at all in Israel, because we're not allowed to talk about it, is how many Palestinians we're killing and wounding in the course of the war, in the course of going back to war. I don't overly worry about Palestinians. They started the war and everything, but on the other hand, it's one thing the first couple of months and immediately afterwards, and if we're accomplishing something, if it looks like we're doing this because we can win. But a year and a half into the war, what justifications do we really have for many of the things we're doing? And it's very sad. It's sad what it's turning our soldiers into. It's sad because it's happening to people, and dehumanizing them and dehumanizing us, and it dehumanizes us because we can't even talk about it. We can't have it. There can't be a real discussion about it here in Israel at the moment because we're just not. We just can't. Okay. In any case, we're at the halfway point and ready to take some questions. So, does anyone have any questions? Please raise your virtual hand, and we'll hopefully see you and call on you. And if not, there's one question in the chat, which I'll get to if no one first has any questions. Okay. Okay, so someone asked, are any of the opposition parties proposing anything different to the government? Are accepting stop the war in exchange for all the hostages? All of the opposition parties are basically saying we should stop the war in return for receiving back all the hostages. Nobody loves Hamas. No one is saying that Hamas is right or anything, but every opposition party, I can't think of any of them who don't say, first return the hostages. Then we can worry about Hamas and go back to war. But let's first end the war, get back the hostages. Once we do that, number one, we'll get back the hostages, the biggest point of all. But if we go back to war, we can go back to war without worrying that we might be killing the hostages by accident. That we can't go into certain areas of Gaza because there are hostages there and they'll kill the hostages if we come there. So theoretically, even with the goal of eliminating Hamas, theoretically, getting back the hostages is a first step and will increase the chances of us being able to do that. Okay, I'll look some more for anyone with any questions. There we go. Nancy, go ahead.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon to you. A different issue that you didn't mention yet is the timetable for Netanyahu's trial, which I understand cross-examination was supposed to begin very soon. And he announced a trip to Azerbaijan, which just conveniently was going to be right around that time, but he had to cancel it because Turkey wouldn't give permission for him to fly over Turkish airspace. So is he going to have to show up in court for cross-examination anytime soon?
Yes, I mean, theoretically, it will take place, I think it was set for the first week of June. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's what it was set, June 6th or June, something in that, in the beginning of June is when the cross-examination begins. He's been, that's what he wants to avoid at all costs, because it's one thing, he's given testimony for the last 2 months. Again, the Israeli system is insane. The idea that you give testimony for 2 months, it would never in a million years be allowed. And I don't know about the European systems, but in the U.S., you wouldn't have someone on the stand for 2 months. It's just, I mean, altogether with the cross-examination, they'll be on the stand for 6 months, a half a year. I mean, it's insane. And so much of what his thing was repetitive. It was totally repetitive, and his goal is to pull it out. But look, we don't know. As some political commentator said, we could all wake up one morning and discover that he's signed an agreement to Hesder Tiyun, which means a plea bargain, and he will, leave the prime ministership in return for not being, having charges dropped or some combination therein. Everyone in the country would favor that. I don't know of anybody who would prefer him staying in power and running for election again to the bitter end, and then hopefully at some point putting him in jail, as opposed to leave now, don't collect go, and don't collect $200 a go and leave us, and leave us. Will he do it? We don't know. One of the big ifs we don't know about Netanyahu is just his health. He is not a well man, but beyond that, even people who are not well can live for many, many, many years. He's not, he doesn't seem to be impaired in any way uh, from an intellectual standpoint. I mean, I think he's out of his mind, but we'll leave that part aside. He made a comment, I think it was Thursday night, where he said on a video that he sleeps well at night. And that drove the country, or most of the country, completely crazy. How can you possibly sell you sleep well at night? I mean, I don't, even a prime minister that hadn't made the mistakes that he made around October 7th and didn't have the responsibility for getting back the hostages. I don't know if I was in charge. I mean, I don't, if I was in charge of all the problems we have in the state of Israel, and I was great at solving them all. Let's say I was 100% good at, I still wouldn't sleep well at night because there are too many problems to deal with at any given moment. So how he talks about it, I sleep well at night. I don't know. I guess maybe he takes a lot of drugs. I don't know. But that's but that puts a clear side of his disconnect from the rest of the reality of Israel at this point. Anyone else? Brian.
Hi, can you give an update on what's the state of play with the attempts to sack the Attorney General?
Yeah, the attempts to sack the Attorney General have run into some difficulties on a very technical level. Because she was appointed by a committee that appointed her, is like a committee of to appoint senior officials. And the only way of taking her out of office is having that committee meet and voting to take her out of office. However, that committee doesn't have enough members on the committee, and statutory, the people who have to be on that committee include someone who is a former justice minister, and the only two justice ministers, all the former justice ministers, would vote against that move. They've all said so, with the exception of two. One is the current justice minister, and therefore that's be problematic for him to do that, and one who's the chairman of the Knesset. And that's what the Likud wants to make Ohana and to appoint him to the committee. But there's no doubt the Supreme Court would knock that down, and they understand that. So they can't put the committee together. And so without putting the committee together, they can't really move forward. On top of which, ultimately, the Supreme Court would probably override the decision. Remember the fact that go all the way back. The fact of the matter is that they voted the stupidest decision in history, that someone who was on trial for corruption could serve as prime minister. Forget about removing him from office, but serve, in other words, be appointed prime minister. But he had to not have anything to do with anything relating to the Ministry of Justice, everything related to his trial. So it's very hard to say that removing the Attorney General, who's responsible for prosecuting him, is not touching anything from his trial. And it would be really hard to say, well, I wasn't involved, it was the other people in the government, but everyone knows that he controls the government, so it wouldn't pass the smell test. So I don't see it happening anytime soon. I could be surprised, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. After we saw what happened when he tried to get rid of the head of the Shin Bet, who himself said he wanted to leave, it's quite clear that I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Anyone else? Yeah, I see what Nancy wrote in the chat. Okay. One of the problems in the protest movement at the moment is the protests are divided in multiple ways. on any given Saturday night, there tend to be three separate protest rallies. Two of them get together. There's the protest rally takes place at Habima against the government. It's an anti-government rally. There's a protest that takes place in Hostage Square, which is on behalf of releasing all the hostages, which is anti-government in the sense that it's against the government policy relating to hostages. And then some get together in terms of Beacon Street to do both afterwards. The one that gets the most publicity every week is the one for the hostages. You know, the problem with the posters with the dead Palestinian children is twofold. Number one,
Please mute that person.
Number one, it's hard again when to show the dead Palestinians and then the posters of the hostages who are still being held. I mean, they're dead Israelis and they're Israelis that are dying in the tunnels of Hamas. Now you can make the argument that our government isn't agreeing to a hostage deal, but they were taken hostage. These are not people who volunteered to go to Gaza. These are people who are taken, half of them, out of their beds at night or in the morning, and taken hostage. So it's hard to balance the two. I said a few minutes ago that I think it's a problem that we don't have enough empathy, or any empathy, frankly, practically any empathy, for the dead Palestinians. It's a problem on a human basis. But on the other hand, Israelis are worn out with empathy. It's really, really difficult after a year and a half of hearing about every dead soldier that died and his family and the life that he's not going to have and everything else like that. And these are people we identify with much more. And when you finish getting through with all that empathy for the poor family and for the soldier who died, not to mention, of course, earlier the hostages that died, or when a dead hostage is brought back to Israel, it just doesn't bring about a lot of ability for Israelis to show the empathy. It's not good. I don't think it's a good thing, but I don't see a successful protest developing based on what we're doing to the Palestinians. Just realpolitik. I just don't see it happening. Yes, about not getting back the hostages. Yes, about no more soldiers dying in Gaza for no reason. But I don't see it happening via the Palestinians. You look back at the story of our conflict, and you look all the way through. So many times Israelis have lost empathy after bombings, after other massacres over the years, and it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to separate out humanity from the fact that so many people want to kill you. And so it's difficult. And I don't have an easy solution for it. I have a real problem with the religious right who calls everyone, every Palestinian Amalek. So if they're Amalek, you're religiously you're supposed to kill them all. But since I'm neither religious nor do I believe they're Amalek, I have a real problem with that. But I also understand why it's not a winning ticket. It isn't. Israelis have to decide that we need some sort of a separation for our own good and not for the good of the Palestinians. And I think that's really more than anything else. I see the question someone just asked: does anyone support the idea of the IDF directly distributing aid to the Gazans? Look, it's also a difficult thing. I thought a long time ago we were making mistakes in Gaza in that direction. I thought the third month of the war, or the second month of the war, when there were accusations made that we were making it difficult for Gazan women to give birth in hospitals, I thought we should have set up a maternity hospital for Gazan women, excuse me. Based on what I said just before, it would not get a great deal of support, but I thought that would be a good solution to the problem. I think this idea of creating a safe zone where unarmed Palestinians come into and get food, I don't really think it makes a difference who's giving out the food. And I don't have a problem with Israelis giving it out the food. We just don't have enough troops to do it, but leave that part aside. But the idea of creating enclaves, I don't think it's a bad idea. I also thought, going all the way back, that we should have created an enclave for Gazans in a corner of the Negev to let them go out to, where we control and Hamas doesn't control. And we provide them with all of the, aid, food, and even schooling in the meantime, temporarily. We could have done something like that, but all these things require thinking out of the box. And, the last leader who thought out of his box was probably Shimon Peres, and he's been gone already too many years. So we haven't done any out of the box thinking in terms of this. Hopefully, some ideas will work. I don't know. Someone just Claude, I don't know. I don't see your hand there, but my wife says you're.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry to say this, but the starving, fighting for food Palestinians only made it to page 7 in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, but they were on page 1 on the front page last week. Are Israelis aware of their position in the world in regards to the situation? Can you see from your side of the sea what the rest of the world is seeing?
Okay, so the answer is no. Can I see yes? I mean, I see American, I
Not
read
Americans, the world.
the world,
Whether it's
too.
French
I read
friends, my
newspapers.
South American friends, my Catholic friends, my Muslim.
Listen, I don't read Spanish newspaper, but I see what the world is seeing. There's no question about that. Israelis generally don't see it. Israelis will say the whole world is against us, so what difference does it make? They've always been against us. They always hate us. They're all anti-Semites. You go through all of those different things and, all those different excuses. Israelis don't see it. They don't understand it. They don't realize what it means. I mean, yesterday, there was a report that the army says it can completely defeat uh, Hamas. It will take 2 years of intensive warfare. Like 2 years of intensive warfare. Does anyone think that, what this country will be like after 2 years of intensive warfare? Will there be anyone left here who want to stay here? Will we have any relations with any part of the world? I mean, it's insane. It's insane that anyone even be thinking about that as a real option. It's insane not to realize that after a year and 8 months, Khalas, enough. Yes, if you could have defeated all of Hamas in the first 3 months, you had carte blanche to kill as many Hamas people as you wanted and fight as hard as you want and everything else like that. But now, after this a year and 8 months, you've lost that part of the war. Thankfully, we beat Hezbollah. We changed the strategic balance. We effectively beat Iran, but Hamas will come out still alive, weaker, etc. And with the knowledge that at any given time Israel can go anywhere as it wants in Gaza and it can't stop it. It's not like after Tzuk Eitan where Israel had tremendous losses relative to the gains. At this point, Israel can move if it wants to any part of Gaza in a short period of time. Our tanks and armed personnel carriers are almost impervious to any sort of attacks. Nothing can stop them. So, but we've lost the fact that we can't eliminate Hamas unless we fight forever. And so, I don't, but Israelis are completely unaware or uncaring about what the world thinks. And, we talk about Hasbara. It's like insane. Thankfully, I'm not in charge of Hasbara in any which way. Thankfully, I'm not in America and have to be responsible for Hasbara at the moment. But but then, we go to extremes, right? So we have to figure out the way without defending the current government's policy to deal with the people on campuses, etc., who say that the state of Israel is an illegitimate state. The whole idea of a Jewish state is illegitimate. So, there are different degrees and things that we need how to deal with, and I don't have all those answers, to be quite honest. I'm glad I don't work for the Israeli government and have to follow the government line. I wish I could have more impact on our policies here, but there'll be elections at some point, I hope. If someone asked in the chat about the new Pope, I basically heard we have no idea. I mean, his statement today is, apple pie in the world. Ceasefire and bring back the hostages. I mean, okay. I think 90% of the world agrees with that. Maybe 95% of the world agrees with that. And generally what his positions are, people looking to the courses he took in Villanova. That's how deep they're looking to try to hope for some sort of, what he'll be like to Israel and the Jews. That we'll have to see. Okay. Anybody else? I see the question about forcing everyone into the South. The issue is, again, if there are hostages there, and I'm not sure what the plan is relating to that. I don't know. It's part of the problem of trying to fight a war when there are hostages in the midst. Of course, if the Israeli government doesn't care about the hostages at some point, then I don't know what it'll be. Anybody else? Last call. Okay. I thank you all. If anyone has any comments to make about the podcast, please let me know. The music will be improved at the beginning, and we'll try to move it along and have some guests also. So I hope you're all listening to the podcast, although I'm sure you get tired of hearing my voice so much. So in any case, everybody have a good 2 weeks. Every conversation here ends with hopefully we'll hear good news this week. I was having coffee by accident, but with two correspondents with Khan at Channel 11, and the end reading was everyone will have a good week, and hopefully we'll have good news this week. It's every week it's the same. Hopefully we'll have good news this week. So hopefully we'll have good news this week. At some point, what can I say? Maybe Trump will bring about good news this week. I don't know. Do not know.